He placed his last silver dollar on the table for a woman nobody wanted. But why did she whisper the one sentence that made him stop? The wooden platform creaked as the hooded woman stood frozen in the cold Iron Mesa wind. Coins hit the table. The crowd laughed. Then a quiet cowboy stepped forward, placed his final dollar down, and cut her rope without asking a single question. As she looked up for the first time, her broken whisper revealed a secret he never expected to hear. Would you have made the same choice? The morning the woman was put on the wooden platform in Iron Mesa, the wind was cold enough to sting through a wool coat. The mining town sat between dark mountain ridges and endless stretches of dry earth. Smoke rose from the chimneys. Horses stamped their hooves beside the muddy road. Miners gathered outside the general store, their boots covered in dust and snowmelt. But nobody was looking at the woman as a person. A rough cloth hood covered her head. Her hands were tied in front of her. The faded dress she wore had seen better days, and every step she took toward the platform looked heavier than the last. A few people whispered. Some looked away. Others watched with the uncomfortable curiosity of people who knew something was wrong but had decided it was easier not to speak. Deputy Doyle Mercer stood beside the platform with his badge shining beneath the pale morning sun. "Folks of Iron Mesa," he announced, his voice carrying across the street. "This woman has caused trouble. She has brought accusations against good people. She is dangerous." The crowd shifted. Nobody asked for proof. Nobody asked her name. The woman kept her head lowered. A small wooden table sat beside the platform. On it were papers, a tin cup, and a cracked bell that Mercer struck whenever he wanted attention. "This town has no room for problems," he said. The bell rang. The sound echoed between the buildings. Then came the numbers. A few coins. A few careless offers. Not enough to mean anything. Just enough to remind her that the people around her had forgotten she was human. At the edge of the crowd stood a cowboy who had not spoken a single word. Caleb Turner wore an old brown coat with worn leather gloves. His horse waited near the fence, carrying a small pack of supplies from the trading post. He was not a wealthy man. The ranch he worked was barely enough to keep. The coffee in his cabin was usually stretched with extra water because he counted every pound of beans. But when he looked at the platform, he did not see what everyone else saw. He saw someone standing alone, someone who had been waiting for one person to decide she mattered. Doyle Mercer raised his voice. "Last chance." Silence followed. Then Caleb stepped forward. The crowd turned. A few men laughed quietly. "Turner?" someone called. "You're spending money today?" Caleb ignored them. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single silver dollar, the last one he had. The coin rested in his palm for a moment. Then he placed it on the wooden table. $1. That was all. Doyle Mercer stared at the coin. "You're serious?" Caleb looked at the woman on the platform. "I am." The deputy gave a short laugh. "You know what you're buying?" Caleb's eyes did not leave the hooded woman. "No." The answer surprised everyone. Then he added quietly, "But I know what I'm standing against." The laughter disappeared. Caleb climbed the platform slowly. The woman stepped back when he approached. Not because she feared him, because she had learned to fear anyone who came close. Caleb noticed. He stopped. He did not reach for her. He simply took out his pocket knife and carefully cut the rope around her wrists. The rope fell into the snow. For a moment, neither of them moved. The whole town watched. Caleb stepped away, giving her room. The woman slowly lifted her hands, rubbing the marks left by the rope. She looked toward him through the opening beneath the hood. No one had asked her what she wanted all morning. No one had looked at her like she still had a choice. Her voice was barely louder than the wind. No one has ever chosen me before. Caleb did not answer right away. He only picked up his old hat, placed it back on his head, and stepped down from the platform. Behind him, Iron Mesa remained silent, because everyone there understood one thing. A man with almost nothing had just given away the last thing he owned, for someone nobody else wanted. The road out of Iron Mesa was quiet after the crowd disappeared behind them. Caleb Turner walked beside his horse instead of riding. The woman followed a few steps behind, still wearing the rough hood that hid her face. He noticed the way she watched every movement he made. Every time his hand moved toward his coat, her shoulders tightened. So Caleb stopped doing it. He carried the reins in one hand and kept the other where she could see it. They traveled along the narrow trail toward Cedar Ridge, where the mountains rose higher and the pine trees grew thick enough to block the wind. The afternoon sky turned gray, and small flakes of snow began landing on the old leather of Caleb's coat. After several miles, he looked back. "You can ride," he said. The woman did not answer. Caleb looked at the saddle. "You'll be warmer." Still nothing. Then he understood. She was not refusing the horse. She was refusing to get close enough to someone who had power over her. Caleb slowly removed a blanket from his pack and placed it on the saddle. "Take it if you want." Then he turned away. A few moments later, he heard the quiet sound of her climbing onto the horse. He did not look back. By sunset, they reached the small ranch house hidden between the red rocks of Cedar Ridge. It was not much. A wooden cabin, a small barn, a fence that needed repairing, a water pump that groaned every time it was used. But it was quiet. Caleb opened the door and stepped aside. The woman stood there, unsure. "You can come in," he said. She waited. Caleb walked inside, placed his rifle against the far wall, and moved away from it. Then he poured water into a tin cup and set it on the table. "Food is there." He pointed toward a small plate of bread and beans. "You can sleep inside." The woman looked toward the single bed. Caleb picked up a blanket from a shelf and, "I'll use the porch." Her eyes lifted for the first time. "You're leaving?" The question was so quiet that Caleb almost missed it. "No." He placed the blanket over his arm. "I'm giving you space." That was all he said. That night, the wind moved through Cedar Ridge like a low whisper. Inside the cabin, the woman sat near the fire but did not touch the food for a long time. Outside, Caleb sat beneath the porch roof with his back against a wooden post. He did not lock the door, not once. The next morning, she found a fresh cup of water waiting beside the table. No questions, no demands, only water. The days passed slowly. Caleb repaired the fence. He fed the horses. He chopped wood before sunrise when the air was still cold. The woman stayed near the cabin walls, always listening. When a branch cracked outside, she covered her head before she realized what she was doing. Caleb saw it. He said nothing. He simply placed another log into the fire and moved back. On the fourth evening, she finally removed the hood herself. Caleb was sitting at the table, checking a broken pocket watch that had belonged to his father. He looked up, then looked away. Not because he did not care, because he understood she deserved a moment that belonged only to her. Her face carried the signs of a difficult road, but her eyes were steady. "I have a name," she said. Caleb placed the pocket watch down. "I figured you did." A small pause filled the room. "Eliza Brooks." He nodded once. "Caleb Turner." She looked toward the window. "You already knew I wasn't what they said." Caleb leaned back in his chair. "I knew they were too eager to tell me who you were." The fire cracked between them. For the first time since Iron Mesa, Eliza looked less like someone waiting for the next order, and more like someone remembering she still had a voice. But that night, just before the lamps went out, Caleb found something outside the cabin door. A folded piece of paper, a horse track leading away from the ranch, and a name written across the top. Eliza Brooks. Someone was looking for her, and they had already found the trail. Caleb Turner stood outside the cabin before sunrise, holding the folded paper he had found near the door. The snow around Cedar Ridge was thin, but the tracks were clear. One horse, one rider. Someone had stopped close enough to leave the message, not close enough to be seen. Caleb looked down at the paper again. It was not an official notice from the county office. It was a reward posting, printed on cheap paper with dark ink. Eliza Brooks, wanted for questioning, connected to the death of Harland Crow, a large landowner, a man whose name was known across the valley. Caleb folded the paper and placed it inside his coat. When he walked back inside, Eliza was already awake. She sat near the small kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee between both hands. She had not finished it. She rarely finished anything quickly. Every meal, every drink, every moment of rest. She treated them like they could disappear. Caleb placed the paper on the table. Eliza saw the name. Her fingers stopped moving. For a few seconds, the cabin was silent, except for the sound of the fire. "They found you," Caleb said. Eliza did not deny it. She only looked at the paper. "I knew they would." Caleb pulled out a chair, but did not sit. "Who is Harland Crow?" Eliza looked toward the window. Outside, the morning fog rested between the pine trees. "He owned more land than any man should." She paused. "People thought he built his fortune by working harder than everyone else." Her eyes lowered. They were wrong. Caleb waited. He had learned quickly that Eliza spoke when she was ready, not when someone demanded it. "My father worked land near the southern ridge," she said. "A small place, nothing fancy, but it was ours." Her thumb moved along the edge of the coffee cup. "Crow wanted that land." Caleb noticed the way she said wanted, not needed, wanted. "There was a contract," she continued, "a transfer agreement, but the signature on it wasn't real." She reached down slowly and lifted the edge of her dress. Hidden inside a carefully repaired seam was a small piece of folded paper. Caleb did not step closer. Eliza placed it on the table herself. A torn section of a land document. A signature, a seal, and a name that did not belong. Harland Crow was going to use this to take land from families who could not fight him. Caleb looked at the paper. "Why would they say you killed him?" Eliza's expression changed. Not fear, something quieter. Disappointment. "Because dead men cannot answer questions." The words stayed in the room. Caleb looked toward the rifle hanging on the wall, then back at Eliza. "Silas Crow." She nodded. "Harlan's son. The one who put your name on that paper?" "No." Her voice became softer. "The one who made sure nobody would believe me." A knock came before either of them could say more. 3 slow knocks. Caleb moved toward the door. Eliza immediately stood. The old fear returned for a moment. Caleb noticed. He lifted one hand. Not a command. A reminder. "You are safe." He opened the door. An older woman stood outside holding a basket covered with cloth. Martha Keene lived on the next ridge over. She owned a small chicken farm and had brought eggs to Caleb twice a month for nearly 3 years. Her eyes moved from Caleb to Eliza, then to the paper on the table. "I saw the rider," Martha said. Caleb frowned. "When?" "Last night." She stepped inside and placed the basket down. Man was asking questions at the creek crossing. Eliza looked away. Martha noticed, but she did not stare. That was the first thing Eliza seemed to remember about her. Martha treated silence like something worth respecting. They're offering money, Martha said quietly. Caleb looked at her. How much? Enough to make hungry men forget their manners. The room became still. That afternoon, Caleb went outside and prepared his horse. Eliza watched from the doorway. You're leaving. It was not a question. Caleb tightened the saddle strap. Yes. Her face changed slightly. Not anger, not sadness. Something closer to understanding what she expected all along. Then Caleb picked up another box of ammunition from the barn. Eliza looked at it. You're taking me. Caleb looked at her. If I leave you here, they come here next. She said nothing. After a moment, she whispered, You can walk away. They'll let you. Caleb held her gaze. For a long second, the only sound was the wind moving through the cedar trees. Then he turned back to the horse. He tightened the final strap. No. That was all. No speech. No promise. Just one word. Before they left Cedar Ridge, Caleb placed a small rifle on the table. Not in her hands. Not forcing her. Just there. For emergencies. Eliza looked at it. I don't know how. I'll show you. He stepped back. Only if you want to learn. That answer surprised her more than anything else. The next morning, beneath the pale sky of Cedar Ridge, Caleb taught Eliza how to hold the rifle. He never grabbed her hands, never moved closer than necessary. He simply showed her, slowly, patiently. When her finger touched the trigger, it trembled. She lowered the rifle. I can't. Caleb looked at her. You don't have to be fearless. A small pause. You just have to keep standing. For the first time, Eliza looked at him without searching for the danger. Only the man standing in front of her. But far beyond Cedar Ridge, another rider was already moving through the mountains. And on his coat was the name of the man who wanted Eliza Brooks found. Silas Crow. The trail through Red Canyon was narrow and unforgiving. Tall walls of red stone rose on both sides, blocking the morning sun. The wind moved through the canyon like a warning, carrying the smell of rain and dust across the empty land. Caleb Turner rode ahead. Eliza followed behind him. For 2 days, they had traveled without stopping in one place for long. They slept beneath the stars when the weather allowed it. They drank coffee from a small tin cup beside quiet fires. They spoke only when words were needed. But something had changed. Eliza no longer walked several steps behind Caleb. She walked beside him. Not because she had forgotten what happened in Iron Mesa, because she had learned that not every man who stood close was there to take something from her. That morning, Caleb checked the ridge above them. Too quiet. He slowed his horse. Eliza noticed. What is it? Caleb looked toward the rocks. Nothing yet. She studied his face. She had learned that Caleb Turner was not a man who wasted words. If he said nothing, it usually meant he was listening. They moved deeper into the canyon. Then the sound came, a horse moving across stone. Caleb stopped immediately. His hand reached toward his rifle. Not quickly, not with panic, with the same calm he showed when repairing a broken fence or calming a frightened horse. Eliza, he said softly. She already knew. She moved behind a large rock. The first shot cracked through the canyon air. Caleb pushed his horse forward and pulled Eliza away from the open trail. Stay low. More riders appeared along the ridge, men hired by Silas Crow. They were not there to talk. Caleb fired back only when he had to, trying to create a path through the canyon rather than start a fight. Eliza, we need to move. They ran through the narrow passage as the sound of horses echoed behind them. Then Caleb stopped. A sharp pain crossed his face. He stumbled. Eliza saw the blood on his coat. "Caleb, I'm fine." But he was not. He leaned against the canyon wall, trying to stay standing. The same man who had walked into Iron Mesa with $1 left was now barely able to hold his rifle. Eliza looked back toward the trail, then at him. For a moment, she was the woman from the auction platform again, the woman who waited for someone else to decide her future. Then she saw Caleb's rifle lying in the dust. She picked it up, her hands shook. Caleb looked at her. "Eliza." She looked back. "I know." It was the same fear she had carried for years, but this time, she did not let it choose for her. She stepped forward. The rider coming down the slope saw her. He expected the frightened woman from the wanted poster. He did not expect the woman standing there with steady eyes. A single shot echoed through Red Canyon. Then silence returned. Eliza stood frozen. The rifle lowered slowly in her hands. Caleb watched her, not with surprise, with something closer to respect. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, but she did not look away from the canyon. "No," she whispered. A pause. "But I'm still here." That night, they found shelter inside an old mining cave near the edge of the canyon. The fire was small. The wind outside was strong. Eliza tore a strip from her dress and carefully wrapped Caleb's wound. Her hands were not as steady as she wanted them to be. Caleb noticed. "You don't have to prove anything." She tied the cloth tighter. "I know." Another quiet moment passed. Then she looked at him. "I thought being afraid meant I was weak." Caleb looked into the fire. "Fear means you understand what something costs." The words stayed with her. Hours later, Caleb woke briefly. The fire had almost gone out. Eliza sat near the entrance of the cave, the rifle resting across her knees. She had not slept. She was watching the darkness, protecting him. Caleb opened his mouth to speak, then stopped, because for the first time in a long while, he was not the only person standing guard. Outside Red Canyon, the wind carried the sound of approaching riders, and somewhere beyond those mountains, Silas Crow was running out of time. By sunrise, Caleb Turner and Eliza Brooks were already moving. The night inside the old mining cave had been cold, but neither of them complained. Caleb packed the small supplies they had left. Eliza folded the blanket carefully and placed it back on the saddle. A few weeks earlier, she would have waited for someone to tell her what came next. Now she checked the trail herself. She looked at the sky. She watched the horses. She noticed the things Caleb noticed. When they finally reached the road leading toward Dry Creek Junction, the mountains opened into a wide valley. Smoke rose from chimneys in the distance. Wagons moved along the main street. The sound of a church bell carried through the morning air. To most people, it looked peaceful. But Eliza knew better. A quiet town could hide just as many secrets as a dark canyon. Dry Creek Junction had a courthouse built from pale wood and stone. The steps were worn from years of boots walking across them. Caleb helped tie the horses outside. Eliza stood still for a moment. The courthouse doors were only a few yards away, but she remembered another platform, another crowd, another time when people looked at her before they knew her. Caleb noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to do this alone." Eliza looked at him. For a moment, she almost reached for his hand, but she stopped. Not because she did not trust him, because she needed to take this step herself. "Oh, I know," she said. Then she walked forward. Inside the courthouse, the room filled quickly. News traveled fast in places like Dry Creek Junction. People whispered. Some recognized Caleb. Others recognized Eliza. A man near the back spoke quietly. "That's the woman from the Crow case." Another person looked toward Caleb. "That's the rancher who took her." The same kind of silence from Iron Mesa started returning. Eliza felt it, but she kept walking. Then the courthouse doors opened. Silas Crow entered. He looked nothing like the man Eliza had described. His coat was clean. His boots were polished. His voice was calm. He looked like a respectable businessman, not a man running from the truth. "Judge," Silas said, "I believe this entire situation is a misunderstanding." His eyes moved toward Eliza. A small, controlled smile appeared. "Eliza has been through a difficult time." Caleb's expression hardened, but Eliza lifted her hand slightly, not asking him to protect her, asking him to trust her. Silas continued. "She has made accusations because she is afraid. She has convinced this man to help her continue a story that has no proof." The room shifted. For a second, the old fear returned. Then Eliza reached into her coat. She removed the folded piece of paper she had carried across mountains. The land document, the one that almost disappeared. She walked toward the judge's table. Not quickly, not angrily, just steadily. "This is the proof I have." Her voice was quiet, but the room heard every word. She explained the land agreement, the false signature, the families who lost their homes, the people who were afraid to speak. Silas shook his head. "Judge, she is twisting events." Before the judge could answer, a voice came from the back of the room. "I saw it." Everyone turned. Martha Keene stood near the doorway. Her hands held the edge of her coat, but she stepped forward anyway. "I saw Harlan Crow pressure those families." Silas stared at her. "Martha, be careful." She looked at him. "No." A quiet word, but stronger than shouting. "I stayed quiet because I thought silence would keep me safe." The room became still. Then another man stood, an older worker who had once repaired fences on Crow land. His hat remained in his hands. "I was paid to keep my mouth shut." He looked down. "I told myself it wasn't my business." His voice cracked slightly, but it was. Silas's calm expression began to disappear. The same town that once repeated his words was now listening to someone else. The judge reviewed the documents. Questions were asked. Records were checked. And slowly, the story Silas Crow had built began falling apart. When the final order was given, Silas stood silent. The accusations against Eliza Brooks were dismissed. The investigation into Harlan Crow's land dealings was reopened. For the first time in a long time, Eliza heard her own name spoken without suspicion. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun warmed the wooden steps. Caleb stood beside the horses. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old silver dollar, the same dollar he had placed on the auction table in Iron Mesa. He placed it in Eliza's hand. She looked down at it. "You kept it?" Caleb nodded. "I thought you should have it." She closed her fingers around the coin, then looked up at him. "If I stay," she paused, "it won't be because I owe you." Caleb looked at her quietly. Then he nodded. "I know. No promise. No pressure. Just respect." Months later, the old ranch at Cedar Ridge looked different. The fence was repaired. The garden grew beside the cabin. A small porch had been added where 2 chairs sat beneath the evening sky, and above the front door hung a single silver dollar. Not as a price, not as a reminder of what someone had lost, but as a reminder of the day one person finally chose to see another. And in Cedar Ridge, people eventually learned the truth. Caleb Turner did not save Eliza Brooks by giving her a new life. He simply gave her the space to choose one for herself. And that choice was the thing nobody could ever take away. Maybe that is what we all hope for in our own lives. To be seen when the world looks away. To have someone stand beside us when we are too tired to stand alone. To be given a second chance, not because someone feels sorry for us, but because they believe we are still worth fighting for. Eliza Brooks walked into Cedar Ridge carrying the weight of a name others had tried to destroy. But she walked away knowing something far more powerful. Her past did not decide her future. And Caleb Turner learned something too. Sometimes love is not about saving someone. Sometimes it is about standing beside them long enough for them to remember they can save themselves. If you had been in Eliza's place, would you have found the courage to trust again? Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your story. Thank you for spending this time with us. There are still many stories waiting to be told. Stories of unexpected kindness, hidden courage, and people who find hope in the most unlikely places. If these heartfelt Western stories mean something to you, consider subscribing and joining us for the next journey. Another unforgettable story is waiting just beyond the horizon.